Roaming, 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 keep those wireless roaming rawhide. When we look at our mobility and our converged mobility and the idea that I want to be able to take a wireless device and be able to move it anywhere in this continuum and ensure constant connectivity, never lose that voice over IP connection, never lose my data transfer, never even lose my IP address as I'm moving even from one building to another. I need an infrastructure to make that happen. So we're looking right now at the converged mobility infrastructure and what are the pieces that make that happen. First, we have core functionality that's going to be running here in our converged environment, consisting of the mobility agent and the mobility controller. So the mobility agents are the termination point for the CapWAP tunnels. This maintains the client database. So what clients do I keep track of right now? That's right there at the mobility agent. You can have one or more of those. Then we have mobility controllers, which can be split apart into a dedicated wireless LAN controller, as we see here, or it should be noted, you can throw that mobility controller role onto a single device, right? I don't have to have a dedicated device unless that makes sense, unless I need to control that much traffic. Again, it scales better if you have a dedicated device. All right, so what's happening through the mobility controller? The controller controls your ability to roam. It says, oh, you're moving from this controller to this controller. Here's how we're going to establish this. Here's how we're going to have control plane and data plane traffic moving to ensure you don't lose that voice over IP connection. You don't lose that download. You don't lose anything, right? You stay consistent. So two responsibilities, top level and bottom level roles. Then you have groupings, all right? So you're going to have these mobility controllers and mobility agents. Now, the mobility agents, specifically that are switches, can be put into a switch peer group. And all of those mobility agents in a switch peer group will have automatic built-in CapWAP tunnels to ensure super fast roaming. All right, this is our fastest roaming, is switch to switch. It's awesomely fast. It builds them automatically when you define a switch peer group. It is the preferred method of roaming. This is your best case scenario for roaming. Then one or more mobility agents and mobility controllers together are going to be placed within a mobility group. All right, so we can roam within a mobility group, and all of that is staying within that same boundary, that same set of devices. But we can also roam in between that one mobility group and another. So you might have other groups, and again, I can roam actually still between these different sets of devices as long as I have identified, all right, that they're all mine. And I do that by going ahead and specifying that these all belong to the same mobility domain. All right, the mobility domain, the grouping of MCs to support seamless roaming across mobility groups. So the mobility domain ensures that you can roam back and forth as necessary. Now, if necessary for administrative purposes, I can delegate some of this responsibility. If it's too much traffic essentially happening in one point, I can have what's known as a mobility oracle, which then controls the what happens within one mobility subdomain roaming to another mobility subdomain, each of which may have one or more mobility groups within them, which may have one or more switch peer groups operating down here at the lowest level. So I can even move from a completely separate boundary or jurisdiction. And really the idea is, think about what kind of roaming is going to happen most of the time. Pretty close roaming, right? Probably roaming between access points connected to the same device. That's even simplest. Then we start moving to roaming between access points connected to different switches, but still close to each other in the same switch peer group. Now we're roaming farther than that. Okay, so they're not in the same switch peer group. I'm moving to a different location. So maybe now I need to move to a different group, maybe a different domain. But if we do this all the time, we have tons of roaming going on, and I've got a lot of congestion, and rarely would I roam between those areas. Then I'll divide it, create two subdomains, and then I can roam between the subdomains via the mobility oracle. By the way, it's which is really a function, should be listed up here. Mobility oracle is specifically it's a particular type of mobility controller to roam between subdomains. All right. So in this previous diagram, since we have defined subdomains, we will need to define a mobility oracle to ensure that that occurs correctly, okay? Now, let me focus in just for a second on the switch peer group because the switch peer group is so important. It is our highest speed traffic, and that is because the iOS XE platform with our 3650s and our 3850s, when a switch peer group is defined, is going to build CapWAP tunnels automatically, full mesh. If you've got 3 switches, it meshes all between them so that clients can mesh through, can essentially gain access through the switch peer group nearly instantaneously. All right, it's very, very fast roaming, even as we're moving between our wireless LAN controllers. Don't forget 3650s and 3850s are stackable, but when you create a stack of switches, right, stackwise technology, remember that means they will function as a single object. So this would be between one stack and another. It is not going to form CapWAP tunnels between members of the stack. They just function as a single object. And so that is not necessary in that configuration. Again, we have to operate within the same subdomain within a switch peer group. I do want to mention one other aspect, and that is that the responsibility of being a mobility controller or a mobility agent, being part of a mobility group, is not new. We've had this with controllers in the past, and so I could take a 5508 mobility controller or wireless LAN controller, and I could make it a member of my mobility group, and I can have some of my centralized forms of access function in addition to the converged forms of access and have roaming between all of that. So I don't have to lose my infrastructure that I've already got in order to extend the mobility to work seamlessly across the entire gamut of all of those resources.